Hello everyone. This is a recording about my theory craft for Path of Exile. I don't think I'll have the time to run this build, so I will just post it on the internet and let others enjoy. It is a budget Divine Ire Scion using Wrath and Zealotry as the auras. There's a lot of reasons that I went Scion over Templar. One of the many is this very defensive start with all these resists armor and life being right there. Now, this melee damage and strength node sitting at the start may not seem like much in the overall picture, but when you look at this build a little bit closely, then you'll notice that there's actually some logic here. This build takes a while to get to intelligence. You'll notice it's all the way back up here, and eventually over there. In the time that it takes you to get up to intelligence, one thing you can do with this build is you can run it as melee. Resolute technique is right here for 2 points, which you can forget later on if need be. Most of your bonuses will be elemental. So you can run something like Glacial Hammer, which will work with staffs and maces, if my memory's correct. Glacial Hammer was one of the most effective builds in the history of Path of Exile, thanks to a known build called Jackhammer. Jackhammer isn't run anymore, but the short version is the entire goal is to run Glacial Hammer with Splash. Basically just freeze the whole group and win. That's the entire point. That's very easy to do thanks to all the elemental nodes. But yeah, that's just the beginning of this build. Now let's go ahead and look at the entirety of the build. We'll start with the defensive side. As mentioned, we have the resist and armor plus life down here. But further along the tree, you'll run Tireless. I know that not many people like this, but I happen to. It gives you increased maximum life and reduced mana cost. It doesn't really have much of an effect on Divine Ire, but it has a effect on something like Glacial Hammer or Wave of Conviction. Wave of Conviction actually uses a lot of mana in this build, and you'll see why in a little bit. Devotion for more life up here, Sanctity, Faith and Steel, those are all defensive up there. The Chaos Resist node and Life node, which is Purity of Flesh, Lightning Walker, Hardened Soul, Arcane Will, and Arcane Focus. Those are going to be mostly your defensive stuff right there. This build does run both life and energy shielding. That is why I'm over here in Arcane Will and Arcane Focus. This is to kind of combine forces, if you will. Light Eater is purchased. Between that and Consecrated Ground, it will allow you to regenerate both health and energy shielding. This build has a total of 6,062 total life if you count the energy shielding and life. Now keep in mind that 1752 energy shielding is only active for incoming damage other than chaos. Chaos damage goes through energy shielding. Be very careful with chaos damage on this build, as it's not going to be able to take that much due to that 4,304 life. But assuming that all goes well, then you can combine that Light Eater with all this energy shielding and just soak up that damage. Alright, that's the defensive side. Now let's look at the offensive side. I did go down to Whirling Barrier to get into Counterweight for the Global Critical Strike chance and multiplier. So while getting there, you do get some block chance with your staff. That is going to be the focus of this build later on when you get into spellcasting and going full offensive. You of course have all this stuff, Light of Divinity, Holy Dominion, Retribution, and almost the entire wheel of the Divine thing over here for that area. Going up in here, Sovereignty, I bought the full wheel to make room for the mana cost on Wave of Conviction, but it does also turn out to give you some damage when casting due to it buffing the auras. Singular Focus helps with getting the channel off quicker as well as increasing damage. This build does run heavy on crit as it has Arcane Potency and Serpent Stance combined with what you were seeing earlier, which was Counterweight. So very, very high critical chance and multiplier. Lightning Walker kind of counts as both offensive and defensive, but Arcanist Dominion is definitely pure offensive over on that end. So that's kind of what you're looking at for offense and defense in the entirety of this build. Now let's go ahead and look at the items. You'll notice that this build runs almost entirely on yellows or very cheap uniques. I did happen to check PoE trade before doing this recording to see what the costs were of everything. Assuming that the prices stay where they are now, this build should only cost about 20 chaos to pull off. That's an extremely cheap build. Now that's just including what you see here. This is not including flasks or other things. With flasks and other things, that's going to be different because it's going to depend on what you want to use with this build. This build is very versatile, so you can use any number of things with it. Now, this one's going to, out of all the items, this one's going to require the most explanation, I think. Yes, Incandescent is not everybody's favorite, just like Tireless is, or whatever it's called. But the one thing that Incandescent does really well is having a high armor and energy shield rating. It's going to be a lot higher than even the yellows. In addition to that very high rating, it gives you maximum life. You gain elemental damage as extra chaos damage, which, as you can see with this build, it is accounting for about 4,541 DPS. Then, kind of a slight bonus in some manner is the elemental damage taken as chaos damage. One thing that I noticed when I was running the build prior to this, which was my Brain Rattler build, that there was no monsters that I saw of that lowered your chaos resistance. There was definitely monsters that lowered your elemental resistance. Essentially what Incandescent is doing is redirecting the damage a little bit because of you having it max on this build. So, yeah, there's that. The only other notable things besides all of the yellows here is going to be Voidbringer and Agnerod. Let's go ahead and talk about Agnerod. I did take a look at the Grey Spire, which is a very expensive staff, but you will notice that Grey Spire only increases your DPS by about 917. The difference in price between Agnerod West and Grey Spire is a big gap. A 4-link Agnerod, according to PoE Trade when I just checked it, was 4 chaos. Grey Spire is 40 chaos. Imagine what you can do with 36 chaos. You can buy quality gems or other gear. So, yeah. Short version, Grey Spire, not worth it. Agnerod, totally worth it, though. But you'll need the West one. And I haven't seen too many of them on PoE Trade, but hopefully that will change. The reason you want West is because of that 10 to 120 lightning damage spells, mainly. The lightning penetration does help too, but it's not the focal point of this. So there's that. Voidbringer is there to increase the already high critical strike chance. Thanks to tirelessness, I actually can run badly rolled Voidbringers. You'll notice that for this particular theory craft, I left it at the roll that was assigned on Path of Building, which is 60% increased mana cost. I am not that affected by it because of the tirelessness being there. And this one is worth about 5,106 of my DPS. That's going to be very hard to replace. The only other note that I can give about the items is you'll notice I'm not maxed out on elemental resistance. That's because I ran with rolls assigned by Path of Building, except for the Jewel. The Jewel I left at max rolls for all elemental resist and maximum life. Because if you're going to spend that kind of time looking for that kind of Jewel, then you might as well go all out. But everything else is just whatever Path of Building gave you. Now, this build does use the two-toned armor energy shield boots. It has room for 2% more fire and lightning, which would push you a little bit closer to the max. The two stone rings, I believe, are also in the same thing. Yeah, they're sitting at 14%. They can go up to 16. So assuming that you can max roll those, then you should be fine. Maybe some potions to help you out for that. Okay, items explained. Now let's go into skills. You will notice that this is only a 4-link build. And you will see just how much damage this thing is doing despite being only 4-link on Divine Ire. The other stuff is just kind of thrown in there. You can see that these summon golems aren't linked. Wrath and Zealotry aren't linked. Wave of Conviction is linked in Voidbringer, because Voidbringer does help with the damage a little bit. But yeah, you'll notice that I have nothing in here for lightning penetration, but that can be added later on if you want to. You'll notice that it can raise the DPS by another considerable amount. Unfortunately, Arcane Surge won't trigger with this build, and I have no idea why. Path of Building has that in there. Elemental Focus is just all-around bad, considering that you have all this critical strike chance. Controlled Destruction, even worse. So if you're going to go up to 5-link, get Lightning Penetration, or one of these other ones listed here below it. But yes, you'll see that despite only being 4-link, the overall damage average is 245,401 at a 20-stage release. And then the other thing that you have to look at is just the raw numbers. You'll see that the total skill hit damage is between 112,081 to 181,393, with a 32.64% chance to crit at 3.06 times damage. This build, if it crits, will definitely hit for nearly 500k. This build is insane. Now this is, of course, calculating for Ignited and Shock. Given that the shock rate on this is 36% prior to conductivity and all the other stuff going on, you will definitely be able to shock quite frequently, even without your crits. If you do crit, though, it's gonna hurt. Yeah, so that's pretty much just the overall build and what you're looking at. It's gonna be very defensive, with good stats and damage. That's the most I have. If you happen to run this build, please give me credit and let me know if you do run it. I want to see how well this build does in the hands of other people. I'm sure that you know, others can probably do better than I can. Anyways, thanks for listening.